Welcome to Stories from the Village of Nothing Much. Like easy listening, but for fiction. I'm Kathryn Nicolai. I write and read all the stories you'll hear on the Village of Nothing Much. Audio engineering and sound design is by Bob Wittersheim. Let me take you behind the scenes for a moment. I'm here in my recording booth, and with me at all times is a weighted pillow that I keep on my lap as I read. The effect of the deep pressure stimulation helps me stay in my body, and I like it so much, I called up Quiet Mind, the maker, and said, "Hey, let's work together." So, now available is our very own Nothing Much Happens weighted pillow. It's the perfect holiday gift for NMH fans and folks who need extra help feeling calm and grounded. The first 100 orders will also get 2 months free of our Premium Plus podcast membership. Order now through the link in our bio. Thanks for joining me today for a little dose of calm, happy storytelling. And here's a little reminder if you need it. It's okay to feel good. It's okay to enjoy stuff, even when there is suffering in the world. You denying yourself small pleasures will not help. And we are complex creatures who can hold multiple truths at the same time. So consider that taking time to enjoy, to find things to smile at and relax into, is first important because you deserve that and you feeling good matters. And second, it can help bring more calm, soft energy into the world. And if you can't relate to the feeling that you're supposed to feel guilty instead of good, hey, good on you. Some of us didn't get out of childhood that way, but I'm glad you did. I have a few stories to tell you. Think of this as a grown-up version of the 100-Acre Wood. Just small adventures in daily life, someplace where kindness is commonplace and peace prevails. Now, because it's never a bad idea, let's take a deep inhale through the nose and sigh from your mouth. Do that one more time. Breathe in and really let it out. Good. Our stories today are tales about a small A-frame cabin deep in the woods. We'll visit it as fallen leaves gather in piles around the garden, then further into autumn when chill rain begins to fall, and finally in winter to enjoy the first deep snow of the season. We'll spark a fire in the grate, choose a jigsaw puzzle from the stack in the closet, eat well, and sleep deep. The cabin in the woods. It took a few hours in the car to get there, and I, in the passenger seat, had been dozing, listening to the slow swish of the windshield wipers. It wasn't storming, but there was a slow misting rain that coated the windows and pushed the drying leaves from their branches as we made our way along country roads to the cabin. I blinked my eyes open a few times, let out a slow sigh. A hand reached out for mine and squeezed. I slipped my feet back into my shoes and said in a sleepy voice, "Almost there. Almost." The road was curving and climbing. Tall pines and bright red maples stood on either side, and I felt my shoulders relaxing down my back. The closer we got, the calmer I felt. There was some point on these twisting roads. I wasn't sure if it was always the same point, not a particular mile marker or faded billboard, but a general distance away from everything else and closer to the cabin, where I suddenly felt like I had stepped into a hot shower. and my muscles softened and my breath got deeper. Soon we were turning down a dirt road, then another. We made a left at the fork and turned onto the long pebble drive of the cabin. I sat up taller in my seat and looked through the trees and the mist and squeezed my sweetheart's hand again as the shape of the A-frame came into view. It stood in an open space among the trees, a small meadow which in the summer was filled with sweet williams and black-eyed Susans, and now had drifts of fallen leaves ready for our rakes. It was small, a true cabin with just enough room for the two of us. And the snugness of it, the simplicity that comes from small spaces and fewer choices, was an immediate calming tonic. Inside, we hung our damp jackets on hooks by the door and turned on a few lights, looking around at our tiny space. There was a small kitchen lined with old cupboards and open shelves, upon which stood a few cookbooks tucked between the percolator and the canisters of coffee and oats and flour and sugar. I set a sack of groceries on the counter. We'd stopped at a roadside stand and I'd bought a few pears with papery bronze skin that I might bake into a tart tomorrow. I'd also bought a squat butternut squash and a stem of Brussels sprouts. I drew back the thin, patterned curtain over the pantry and saw a mason jar, half full of arboreal rice and a couple containers of broth. I'd roast the squash and sprouts and stir them into the risotto for dinner. In the middle of the cabin, there was a small square of living space, with a stone fireplace and sofa, an old striped Afghan thrown over the back. Some houses have blankets, some cottages have throws, but cabins have Afghans, crocheted years ago by someone's aunt in elaborate patterns or with an amalgam of the last bits of yarn left in the basket. They don't match anything, but in a cabin, a sofa without one just looks wrong. There was a bathroom with black and white tiles and a small clawfoot tub, and I slipped our toothbrushes into the cup by the sink. I opened the taps and let the water run for a few minutes to clear out the rust and dust. I took fresh towels out of the cupboard and hung them behind the door. There would definitely be a long bath before the weekend was over. The tilting walls of the A-frame leaned in on either side and took your eyes up and out toward the trees around us. We opened the sliding glass to let in a bit of fresh air and stepped out onto the tiny deck where we ate our meals in warm weather. The cabin was situated in a spot that gave a view over the treetops as the land dropped down into a valley below us. I looked up into the highest branches of the pines and saw that they were filled with cones. I thought of the cones wrapping their scales around the precious seeds, protecting them from cold and wind, waiting for the warm weather to open up and let them go. Yes, this is the time of year for holding tight. We stepped back in and closed the door behind us. I took the creaking stairs up to the sleeping loft where our bed was spread with a thick comforter. I unpacked our bags into the old dresser and rooted around in the closet. I found a stack of old jigsaw puzzles and sat on the floor with them for a few moments, looking at the pictures on the boxes. There was a Parisian streetscape, illustrated in bright reds and oranges and glossy blacks. There was a field dotted with rolls of hay and a paddock of sheep in the distance, and one with a tall masted ship on open water, its deck bustling with sailors coiling ropes and tying knots. I tucked the Paris street under my arm and leaned to look over the edge of the loft. I'd heard the door open and close a few times and saw that the wood store was filling up and a fire was coming to life in the grate. I carried my puzzle down to the kitchen table and opened it up and began picking through the pieces to find the edges in the corner. A hot cup of tea was set down beside me as I worked. A teacher had told me once that learning about yourself was a bit like putting a puzzle together. You started with obvious markers and worked your way in toward the bits that were blurry or whose context wasn't clear until it was clicked into place. Sometimes, she said, you might find a piece along the way that doesn't seem to fit anywhere, and suddenly realize it must go to someone else's puzzle. When you did, you'd smilingly set it aside and focus instead on the picture that was taking shape in front of you. I liked that. I sat and looked around at the picture in front of me. A snug, friendly place to retreat to with the person I love. A dinner to cook, a fire to warm by, a bed to lay in as we listened to the rain falling on the old cedar roof. Tomorrow, leaves to rake and flower beds to prepare for the winter. In this small space, we would do small things and enjoy them greatly in the time that we had. Autumn at the cabin. We'd gotten in late in the afternoon. The long drive up had given us time to relax, muscles softening, shoulders dropping down from our ears the closer we got. And when we finally pulled onto the long drive, the 2-track gravel path that curved under canopies of yellow and orange oak leaves that were still clinging to the branches, we already felt different. Time ran differently here, and we were ready to be on a slower schedule. When we parked behind the A-frame and opened the doors, our dog zoomed out into the yard. He was taking stock, checking in on every corner of the place, circling around the shed and running through the wildflower patch. He stopped on the front porch, sniffing along the cracks in the wooden boards, and I wonder if the possum that sometimes took shelter there was back. We opened the doors and let the fresh air in. We'd brought up enough groceries and supplies to stay for a week or so, and while we put things away, I fiddled with the radio till I found a station of soft old songs that we could hum along to. We started a fire straight away. It was a chilly afternoon, and the heat would dry out any dampness that had settled in while we'd been gone. Our dog had found a ball under the sofa, and we'd thrown it out the door and into the yard a few times until he'd settled down on the porch with it between his paws. We refilled the wood store and set a pot of mums we'd brought from town on the kitchen table. We closed all but one of the windows as the sun was setting and the air was turning cold. I took down the popcorn pot from the shelf and set it on the stove. Do you have a pot just for popcorn? I know they make fancy ones that whirl the kernels around while they cook. I'm sure those are good too. But when I say popcorn pot, I just mean the one you've used so many times that the bottom might be a bit burnt, but it always makes fantastic popcorn. I read that you can pop other grains besides corn, like sorghum and amaranth, and even wild rice. Maybe I'd try that over the winter. When the corn was popped, I poured it, hot and delicious smelling, into a huge bowl and salted it generously, then cut up a couple of Honeycrisp apples and dropped them right in with the popcorn. I liked the sweet and salty together. I carried an apple out onto the porch and set it on the edge farthest from the door. If that possum friend was there, I might be lucky enough to see his little paw reach up from under the deck and grab it down. Our dog snuggled in between us on the sofa. We spread the Afghan over our legs and watched the fire crackle and pop. We shared the popcorn and apples, some for our pooch too, and talked a little about what we'd like to do over the next week or so. We put a couple more logs on the fire, and were quiet and relaxed together. I'd brought up a couple of books from my to-be-read pile that I was eager to dive into, but just now I found the only thing I wanted to do was rest my head against the cushions and close my eyes and feel the warmth of the fire on my face. I must have nodded off there. We all must have, because we awoke sometime late at night and blinked confusedly at each other in the low light. The fire had burned down to embers, and we used the poker to spread them out and let them cool. We slid the fireplace doors closed and shut the window. We'd slept right through dinner time, but our snacks seemed to have been plenty satisfying, as all three of us happily went right up into the loft to climb into bed. As soon as I'd pulled the heavy quilt over my shoulder, I fell right back to sleep and slept with that kind of heavy-bodied surrender that makes you feel like you've barely stirred all night, when even your dreams never fully form and seem to be watched down the length of a long telescope. We didn't wake till it was fully light again, and that in itself felt like a triumph. Sometimes you don't know how tired you are until things stop, until you get a chance to step down from the rushing train of everyday business and stand still. Then you may be surprised, as we were last night and this morning, about just how much rest you need. I had a feeling our time here would likely contain many naps and early bedtimes. Our stomachs were growling once we finally got up, and we started with coffees for us and a dog biscuit for the furry one. We carried the coffees out onto the deck and sat wrapped in sweaters while we sipped. I smiled when I noticed that my apple gift of the night before was gone. We thought about making a big breakfast. We had everything we needed to cook one up, but we hadn't been to the little town in the valley for a while, and having someone else set a plate in front of us sounded even better. So we put on jeans and jackets and made the short ride down. Town was just a couple of blocks, a corner store where you could buy a few groceries and supplies, a pub where we'd gone to watch ball games in the summer, a hardware store with a cluttered front window, flyers and pictures of pickup trucks for sale taped to the glass, and a little cafe that served breakfast, lunch, and dinner, unless they decided to hang the closed sign in the window and let you try again another day. They were open today, and we found an empty table along the windows. There is something so comforting and nourishing about sliding into a booth at a favorite place, knowing you'll be fed not just delicious food, but with the care of the people who work there. Our waitress, though she hadn't seen us in months, remembered us, asked us what we'd been up to, how the autumn had been, and had us set up with more coffee and glasses of water in a flash. The menu had just a few simple dishes on it, but they also had a bakery case full of homemade treats, cinnamon buns and nutty donuts and fresh bread. I ordered my usual, French toast with sliced bananas and toasted pecans. We cupped our hands around our coffee mugs and smiled at each other. This week, we'd take long walks in the woods with our dog, clean out the yard and rake the leaves, have a fire most every day, read our books on the porch when it was sunny and from the sofa when the rain fell. We'd drive down dirt roads exploring, watching out for deer and spotting old tree houses still sitting in their branches. We'd make dinner together and go to bed early and let busyness slowly drain from our systems. We would rest. Heavy snow at the cabin. The prediction had been for a foot, at least. It had started over the night, and when I crept out this morning to stick a wooden ruler into the snow beside the bird feeder, it showed 10 inches already. I was giddy as I came back in and knocked the snow off my boots. It doesn't matter how many snowy winters you've lived through. That first big snow of the year is always magical. The view from the window showed an even layer of snow spread over the meadow, with a few bumps and breaks along the way, where a tree stump stuck up out of the flat landscape, or a stubborn young oak still holding his leaves gathered snow in its branches while bare grass clung around its base. Beyond that, the land sloped away and rose up again further on, and I could see our neighbors' houses on the mountainside, wood smoke rising from their chimneys. And above and around all of it was a slow cascade of sparkling flakes that made me grin each time I looked out. Our dog, who'd rushed out with me into the yard and then pretended not to hear me calling for him to come back, was still out chasing through the snow. He was built for it, with fuzzy fur that kept him warm and a drive to explore and run. His long, shaggy black and white body flew across the yard, and I watched him dive into a snowbank and lunge his chest down into the flakes. He rolled and kicked through it like he'd never experienced anything so wonderful. That was part of the wisdom of dogs. They never got numb to joy. Every day was exciting, every meal delicious, every nap satisfying. It made me want to go out and play with him. But first, breakfast. Breakfast for all of us. I cracked the door to the outside and poured a fresh scoop of food into his bowl and watched his ears prick up at the familiar clatter. He sprang to his feet and rushed in, wagging and tip-tapping all over the wood floors. Luckily, these old planks had seen their fair share of snowy paw prints over the years, and were sort of too marked up to show anything new. A lot of things in the cabin were that way. Old enough, off-center enough to be charming and familiar and used without fear of damage. The sound of my dog happily crunching through his kibble brought me back to breakfast. We'd stocked up the fridge and pantry in expectation of possibly being snowed in for a few days. And looking again out the window, it seemed more likely by the moment. I could still hear a soft snore coming from our bed up in the loft, and I figured I may as well take my time and make a nice meal. That was the cabin effect. It slowed us down. We weren't rushing out the door here. We could enjoy and linger. I thought about what sounded good, even laid a hand on my belly and closed my eyes for a moment to ask my body what it was craving. Something sweet. Oh, and something savory, maybe even spicy. I had an idea. Pancakes, obviously, are excellent. Waffles, even better. But what did I never make because I didn't feel I had the time? Crepes. And we had blueberries we'd picked ourselves in the freezer. I thought of a pretty plate of crepes and blueberry compote, dusted with powdered sugar, and started taking flour and vanilla from the pantry. While I was in there, I grabbed a bag of yellow potatoes. We had some ripe avocados and chilies and tomatoes. I could roast up those potatoes until they were absolutely crispy and golden all over, and serve them in tortillas with a side, or who are we kidding here, a nice big bowl of guacamole. It sounded satisfying and fun and snowfall inspired. So I set to work. I ground coffee beans and set the pot to drip. I turned on a local radio station so I could listen to the weather report, and found they were playing an old Christmas album that I loved. I peeled potatoes, I sifted flour. I stopped often to sip coffee. When a sudden gust of wind sent snow rising up and twisting into little whirlwinds in the yard, and I felt a cold blast coming down the chimney, I poured a second cup. The favorite cup. I carried it up into the loft and set it down on the bedside table, as the snoring shifted to slow breathing and then to a soft, startled wakefulness. I brushed hair out of eyes, leant down, and left a kiss on a cheek. Yes, I giggled and whispered, "Breakfast is coming, but we need firewood. Drink your coffee." Climbing down the stairs, I could see out to where I'd left the ruler early this morning. It had completely disappeared, so that was afoot already. I went back to chopping and stirring. The blueberries were thickening in the pot, such a vibrant, beautiful color, and I added a squeeze of lemon juice to balance all the sweetness. On the radio, the music stopped, and I turned the dial higher to hear if there was news. "Stay home," they advised, and I raised my cup in a promise. Snow would continue through the day, and another 6 to 8 inches were expected. The mountain roads would be the last to be cleared, so, the announcer said, "Stay safe up there, folks, and take care of your neighbors." I smiled as he went on about a spaghetti dinner fundraiser coming up the next week, and the winter greens market happening in the parking lot of the hardware store for the next 2 weekends. When the music came back on, I thought about the suggestion to take care of neighbors, and while I had no intention of getting in a car today, I did want to go for a long walk. And I had another bag of those blueberries in the freezer. Maybe scones? We could walk them over to our neighbor's house, drop them off, and make sure they had everything they needed as the snow continued to fall. I was taking the potatoes out of the oven and warming my crepe pan when I heard slow footsteps on the stairs and a sleepy voice humming along to the music. "Snow us in," I thought. "We don't mind a bit." Oh, I love the cabin stories. It's been a long time since I went back to the first one, which is years old by now, from Nothing Much Happens Season 4. And I found it really comforting just to think about and reread. While I am fortunate enough to know well what it is like to have a cottage by the water, I don't have any experience with a cabin in the woods, so all of this is just an extended daydream. I've always found the idea of a tiny house or very small space relaxing. I'm not somebody who wants a lot of options to think about and decide over, so limited spaces don't overwhelm me, they soothe me. This little family, which acquires a dog in the second episode, spends a lot of time here at their cabin in my Nothing Much Happens stories. I have about a half dozen of them by now. And the theme of doing less, resting deeply, and often are always part of them. Now, obviously, I write a show which is specifically meant to induce sleep, but this is something I also taught a lot as a yoga and meditation teacher. I often said, don't just do something, sit there. And I want to remind you to think of rest and non-doing in the same way you think about drinking water. When you notice you're thirsty, I can't imagine you feel guilty about that. You, I hope, don't try to see how much longer you can go without water. And then when you finally get your hands on a glass, try to sip as little as possible. Right? You just drink as much as you need to when you need to. And rest lives in the same category. A bodily need that has nothing to do with moral value or what you should be able to get done. Just a need that requires a response till your cup is full. Another aspect of the story that I don't have personal experience with but find really romantic to imagine is being in the mountains. I have lived most of my life in Michigan, which is probably why I never go more than a story without writing about lakes, but this idea of snowed in on mountain roads and the lighted windows of houses scattered across the rising mountainsides, it's all a fantasy to me. I wonder about this for you. Are there locations, types of scenery or atmospheres where you've never really spent much time, but they seem inherently soothing or adventuresome? That could be a good journal prompt for later. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time on a small island in the St. Clair River, which sits right on the border between Michigan and Canada. And I remember listening to the radio and hearing the weather report and news for our northern neighbors, which, by the way, is still part of Michigan life and something I love. I work with a lot of Canadian folks, one of my agents and my manager, and I think for Michiganders, we grew up feeling like at least a third Canadian, so that always feels like home to tune into their radio stations or find a Canadian coin mixed in with my change. Anyway, I digress. So that bit of tuning the radio dial and hearing the weather report and the spaghetti dinner info, it called back to my days on Harson's Island. I hope this little getaway to the cabin has been restful for you. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back next week with more tales of nothing much. Till then, stay safe up there, folks, and take care of your neighbors.